talking about all of his spears and jigs and
anything I demo, please.
anywhere. I just said he's got the floor for an hour. So, all right, Arnie, go.
At the break here, somebody handed me, I think it was Carl, handed me a sheet that's on the
Boy, how quick
website.
you forget.
And this sheet has some of the same things that I put on my handout. I have to admit, I didn't even know that was on the website. I don't look at it.
Yeah, it's you got to scroll down into it, but there is a section. I think it's under members only, and there's a pull down one that says where to buy stuff. That's where this is. It's a 4-page spreadsheet.
So I titled this "Tools and Supplies I Like." Doesn't mean everybody needs to like them. It doesn't mean anybody needs to dislike them. It's just
Arnie,
that's me.
can you turn your iPad back on?
Oh. Okay. There we go. Whoop. Photos. And we'll start there.
Give it a sec.
Huh?
It should catch up. Maybe not.
This is new to me, running an iPad talking at the same time here. Don't give me a piece of gum.
There we go.
So this is a duplicating jig that I have on an old lathe, and you can see the 4-spindle handle there. That transports the carriage up and down the lathe, and then the handle sticking up in the air by the angle grinder moves the carriage in and out. So at the back there you can see a spindle, and the angle grinder has 5 diamond carbide teeth on it. So it's a really good tool for doing balusters and architectural sorts of things. The reason I put it up there, I've also built jigs that go on that to mount a router. So when you get down to really fine spindles, say like a chair or something like that, we did a chair a couple of years ago for a guy that wanted a replica of a chair that's in New England. It's called the Brewster chair, and he's like a descendant of Brewster. And thank God we made him one as a sample, and he didn't want 5 more. So I think there was 130 spindles in the chair. It was an all-spindle chair. So anyway, that's the reason I bought the jig, and I've done quite a bit of work with it. But just the idea of this is, my talk is, there's different ways to build things. This is just plexiglass. And you can put it together with screws, and then you can hit it with CA glue. And these things are just tough as tough can be. You can beat on this stuff with a hammer. It's like bulletproof glass. So Interstate Plastics down on 160, not too far from the Costco in Sacramento. Just look it up. And they've got a will call room there, and they've got scraps and pieces that are in there that you can just walk in and buy. The other thing they have quite a bit of is this fiberboard that I made the first sphere jig that I made out of it. This stuff is really easy to drill with a Fastener, and again you can tap it, and screw with it, and use a T-nut for threads, and so it's really an easy material to work with.
What's the name of the company, Arnie?
Interstate Plastic. So, huh?
Is there Tap Plastics on Auburn Boulevard?
There's Tap Plastics on Auburn Boulevard. They're like a secondary seller, so they're closer to retail. Interstate is like sells wholesale to people that fabricate a lot of plastic and stuff. For those of you that don't know me, I retired from the prosthetic orthotic business, artificial limbs and braces. So we use tons of plastic and heating and vacuum forming for braces, and I've dealt with resins and glues and all kinds of stuff for my whole career. Started with wood sockets and ended up with titanium and graphite aerospace. So it was a fun career because you never quit learning. You know, you always got to experiment. You always had something new to learn. So I think that's the passion that I take over to this. It's like, oh yeah, that's all right, but maybe we can do it better. So anyway. I'll put this up just because it's shows the use of a magnet. Anybody that doesn't recognize that's never had a cheap little aluminum light hood. And the other reason for showing some of this, you can buy that same dust collector for $195 with a couple of attachments. What did that cost me? $2 at a garage sale. Okay? And I don't know that you want the dust collector, you know, this far up off the bed, you know, sawdust like falls. You got a 4-inch vacuum hose to it. You can just watch the dust flow into that. And it's got a magnet on it, so it's easy to move around and change. And the first thing I put on my little list here was mag switches. Are you familiar with mag switches? They're just cool items. You know, you turn the magnet on, you turn it off. I have 2 of these on a little 45 sled that I can set on my bandsaw. And this just holds that sled well enough that if I'm doing a lot of spindle work, and I've got squares, I can knock off all those edges real quick and easy. Some of the stuff that I did on that duplicating lathe, I didn't try to take off all that stuff. I bandsawed off a lot of those corners because it just is easier and it's quicker and you don't have so much dust flying around. So these are really cool. And another way to use that,
Where do you find them?
you can find them at Rockler. If you buy some of the things from Carter, like a resaw fence, they've got them there. And there's just 2 little 3mm screws that hold them in. You can take a Forstner bit, drill a round hole, and mount them up on anything you want to mount them on, which is this little vise that I put on my drill press. It's much easier to move that around and line up your drill bit than hit the switches than it is to try to move, you know, something that's held in place with a C-clamp. So again, just one of those little things that makes it easy.
Arnie, does that magnet go all the way through your 3/4 inch plywood?
Yeah, yeah, it really holds down. I mean, you can take a mallet and knock it around.
Well, I've got a couple of those on a fence, but I didn't.
Yeah, yeah. So these actually came off the Carter fence.
Yeah.
I think. Actually, I guess these were I got 2 of these.
Yeah.
I just bought a couple others. And I would say buy the strongest one you can afford to buy because there's never too much hold on anything, you know. I mean, it's like, does anybody here own a tool that's too good? No. I mean, so, you know, buy what you can afford and go from there. The other thing that I've spent a lot of time on in the last 7 years is abrasives and sanding and all kinds of stuff. People talking about going to Oregon. I started 7 years ago, right about now, and first coming to this group's meeting when it was different places. And in June of 2012 was the AAW, and it was in San Jose. I went to that for all 3 days. I felt like a dry sponge being hit by a fire hose. There was just so much to absorb. I didn't look at equipment. I didn't look at tools. I just went to the different turning things. And it was really a great experience. So I have to second, if you get a chance to go, go. But you know, you come out of that, and people got really nice stuff, and you know, you don't have the tool control, so you say, well, I'll sand. And I'm going to pass these around. People are buying like the little angle drills to get down inside of a bowl or something. If you take something like this, it's a long drill bit extender. They have them over here at the tool shed. Put a piece of PVC over it, then you can hang on to it. You put this on your tool rest with an impact driver or an electric drill, and you've got total control of sanding down inside of a bowl. You don't have to be down there with your nose in the bowl and some little thing that only sticks out about 2 inches. This works really well. A couple little modifications on one of these. I guess I didn't bring it. Cheryl came over this afternoon, so I unpacked my whole suitcase. Oh, it's here. And then I had to put it back together again.
Blame it on me.
I just cut the edges on this so that the edges are a little bit softer. So when you're sanding in a radius, if you have like a really stiff disc, you know, all of a sudden you put another whole gouge in your bowl because it doesn't flex and move. But by cutting that, and then you can buy these discs that are more of a fiber and they're a little more flexible. And the other trick is to make your sanding disc smaller than your the sanding holder smaller than the disc. Which brings me to another item that I got the idea from Sanding Glove. They have different sized discs that go on this. They just pop in and out, so it's easy to lose, so I didn't even bring the disc. But their suggestion is, if you've got a 2-inch disc, use a 3-inch sanding pad. Why? Because you can move that around and get a lot more use out of your sanding pad. You know, if you've used, sanding pads, a 3-inch on a 3-inch, about all that gets used is about a 1/4-inch little bit right around the outside edge, because that's what's doing all the work. But you move this around off center on a smaller pad, and you get twice as much sanding out of the same disc.
Is that hook and loop,
Yeah, hook and loop, yeah.
have you found a good source on the hooks?
Yes, Sanding Glove has Velcro. Also on my list here, it's coming up here, A&H Abrasives in Casper, Wyoming. They're a branch of some woodworking store. They have hook and loop. They have a whole variety of sanding products. And one of the things about sanding products, I know Mike Mahoney says something about the discs that are in Craft Supply, and they are they're zirconian or whatever. So if you have zirconian, that's sort of like an artificial diamond. Ceramics are really good, really hard material that works really well. And the reason I bring those up is I've made my own scrapers just out of tool steel that I buy, and I'll put the name of that place up a little bit later. I can shape double ends on 2 of these, cut the basic shape, and use the 4-inch belt sander. I can make both of these in less than an hour. And part of the trick of that, Makita makes these really super thin blades, cutting blades. And if you're cutting something that's really thin as you cut, the metal doesn't get hot and it just goes through a lot quicker. If you're using a regular chop saw or something like that for metal that's usually thicker, you'll turn this thing, cherry red, and then now you've altered the tempering and stuff on it. So those little discs are just marvelous. I've actually put a little bit of the curve, a little bit of this, and then with the ceramic belt from A&H, with that little belt sander, you can shape this right in, and that's how I actually sharpen my scrapers, just as a regular, everyday way to work on it. There's a radius on the other end. We can start this and back the other direction. Now, the reason I'm showing these, that little one, 18 inches of that was like $30. This one I bought a 3-foot piece. It was $90, and that's enough to do at least 2. And you could, if you're going to do the regular length of a scraper, you could get 3 out of that. And you're paying over $100 per scraper if you buy it from Craft Supply.
Right.
So, and Cheryl and I were both playing today with the different scrapers back and forth, and I was playing with them earlier. I cannot tell a hoot worth the difference on the burr that it raises, one from the other. If I was blindfolded, I would not know which one I'm using. That's a hardened steel. Why do I talk about saving money? There's certain things you just can't build. A really good gouge is going to come from somebody else. You can't build a gouge, but you can build a scraper. So, put your money where you can put it to get the best bang for the buck. And so that's where I'm at there. And then I did pass this around. These little sanding pads, I've got them all the way from 100 to 600 in a drawer, and I do half sheets, and then I do full sheets, and it makes sanding really easy. And then on your winged bowls, you can sand a winged bowl with a paddle, because your hand's up here and here, it's not near the winged bowl. And you can sand a wing pole with a sanding pad.
You cut those out on advance, what did you?
Yeah, it's just 1/4 inch plywood.
Okay.
Yeah, it just, and I kind of, decide what size pad you want, but a half sheet of regular sandpaper works just perfect on it.
And you glued it with what?
It's not glued, it's just wrapped around.
Okay.
Yeah, and then the foam is glued on, and so that's the next thing I wanted to talk about is adhesives. And, I've been around resins and stuff forever and ever, and where's my notes? I tried to make this organized. How many of you have epoxy available? Little kids? Okay, that's only about 6 of you. I've got 5-minute, 10-minute, 15-minute, 30-minute, kits, and I've got resin. Because, if it's really cold, 5 or 10 minutes is going to be just fine. If it's really hot, you might want 30-minute. And it is just the handiest thing in the world. If you want to make your own tools, or handles, you can't make the tools, but you can make handles. This collet system comes from Robust. They make them in 2 sizes. We have a very sophisticated handle on the inside. It's electrical conduit. A 10-foot piece is what, $4? So you epoxy that into that. Carl came over, I have a lot of leather, so we put a couple of strips of foam and put leather on it to make it an elliptical handle. So, the collet system costs you $75, but that's not a bad deal. This is a similar collet, just a smaller size. It comes from Woodcut at Woodworkers Emporium, and you're in business. And so I've got a drawer with a lot of different tools in it versus having a whole, tubular set of things all with handles on them. And I also find it much easier with the things that need sharpened to sharpen the tool and not have the whole flipping handle to deal with. It makes it a lot easier. Now, for those of you that are contemplating getting into carbide tools, Highland Woodworking has this set of tools for like $65, $70 with about 6 high-speed steel chips for it. The square one has a carbide. There's nothing sacred about Easy Tools or anybody else's carbide. Who do you think uses most carbide chips? Woodturners? Not a day in the world. The commercial wood plants that are putting millions of board feet through their plant have these planers that have a whole rows of these things on there, and they're running 1,000,000 board foot. We're an oh by the way. We're not the primary use of carbide chips. So there's an address on here. You need to buy them 10 at a time. So geez, it's going to cost you $30 for 10 of them.
Instead of 25 for one.
Instead of $15 each.
$15 for one.
Yeah, so, these are the things that, the reason I say I like something is because I'm a little bit cheap. Casey didn't make it tonight. This is a handle that he made. It's really, a piece of 1-inch aluminum. He drilled a round hole into it. I turned it into a rectangle because I want to use my D-Way parting tool in here. And actually, I think I'm going to drill a hole in the other end and tap another hole in it, so I'll have a double ender handle so I can use it 2 different ways. But this is something that is cheap, it's easy to make, and doesn't cost a whole bunch. I'm going to go back to this. I'm going to pass this around. This is something I made, and it's kind of got an offset. I don't know if you can see it wobble or not. This came out of like a shape sander or something that, was like a Rockwell that had all these little pads for doing all kinds of moldings and stuff. And the thing quit. So, curious, I took it apart, and it's got this little offset wobble in there. Well, ArborTech makes the same thing. It's got a little offset, and this fits on an angle grinder. These both work the same. One is free, and the other probably cost me $120.
Hey Arnie,
Yes.
if you touch your iPad, it won't fall asleep again.
Oh, okay.
Just,
So I'm not keeping up with all these things, but that's. And then the other thing is just basic sandpaper. I've seen several of the pro turners say this Japanese paper was really good. I took that to mean that it really was good. And early on, I bought like little, cases of the thing. Early on, I had a few items that I sold in the Colfax at the Creative Corners market. And the joke was that I actually sold enough stuff to buy sandpaper. But that's a good brand. I like it a lot, and so what I put on those panels. We started to talk about epoxies. The other adhesive that I really love is goop. Anybody, old runners from the 70s, they started putting goop on their shoes because the shoes weren't made very well. So if you want to make your own sanding pads, or if you want to glue foam on the edge of a cup for a vacuum, goop it. And it works especially well on the sanding pads because it's not heat sensitive like a lot of your other glues. If you use leather glue or some of the other ones that are, like a two-part glue, you butter up both pieces, kind of let it dry and stick it together, contact adhesive. They stick, but if you want to take them apart, you heat them up. So this is less likely to have the whole thing come apart. And then if you wear out the Velcro, stick it on your lathe and buzz off the Velcro and put on glue on new Velcro. If you need a different shape, something with a little dome on it or something like that, just make what you need. Okay, let's see, where are we at here? We got through the tools. I did a sphere demonstration here a couple years ago, and this is my original little sphere jig. And I've done some more, I just finished another sphere jig for my big lathe. When you start getting into sphere jigs and elbow cavity tool things, the real hardest part of it, I'm not a machinist, I'm Rube Goldberg, is figuring out the right bearing so that it's tight and yet rotates easily.
What's a spear jig?
Sphere jig is when I put a piece of wood on the lathe, I put a cut point in here, I can keep moving this thing back and forth and end up with a perfect sphere.
Oh, spear.
Spheres.
I thought you
Okay?
said
And this is a bigger one that I just made that fits my bit mark. And so I can move this in and out 2 inches. So I can go from about 3 to 5 inches. I haven't actually used it on the lathe, but it works fine. It's tight. The bearings are tight. I messed around with this thing for probably 2 days because I had old bearings from a wheelchair. So we used to rent wheelchairs. And this thing was driving me flipping nuts. I finally went over to Hills Flat. I bought 2 bearings for $9 and it was fixed. So sometimes you can be your own worst enemy about figuring out, what you're going to use or not use or how you're going to get it to work.
Did you say you used to be in a wheelchair?
No. Wheelchair. We sold wheelchairs and we did special seating. And so since I just mentioned that, here's wheels off of wheelchairs. But that's basically what a steady rest is, okay? And the thing about a steady rest is that you can there we go. This is that setup, doing one of the deep bases that I've brought. They're a little bit laborious to set up, but once you set it up, you use the thing in that position for hours, so it's not like you keep messing around with it. And you can see there that I've got a 1-inch bar that's going into the vessel. This is the Jameson hollowing system. It's a big D-ring. And this is a capture back here. So you can just slide it back and forth. And the above is the laser that shows you where you're at when you're hollowing out. And you can make them smaller, or you can make them larger. This aluminum extrusion is really easy to work with. It's just T-slots. And
How's that attached to the bottom of the lathe? I can't see.
huh?
How does that attach to the lathe?
Oh, it's behind there, you just bolt it to the bottom, just, put it on.
With a plate or something?
Yeah, plate, yeah, same like right here. And I would say that everybody that sells these things has a plate that fits your lathe. Instead of trying to make one, I would just get another plate,
Yeah.
because it centers it up and it makes it simple and easy. As long as we're talking that part of it. This original sphere jig, I tried to attach it, hold it, and pivot all on the same bolt. And it worked. But looking through a bunch of these, and I can go through this, how are we doing for time?
8 o'clock.
Yeah, you're doing fine, Aaron.
What do we got, 30 minutes?
About time to go, Arnie.
Okay. It's much easier to, if you're gonna make something, use one bolt to hold the thing onto the lathe, and another bolt to create your pivot. You just, this is dumb simple, this makes this easier also. And I've got a whole bunch of pictures I pulled off the internet of the different elbows, so we'll get to some of the bearings and stuff. But just while I'm thinking about it, just do a two-part system there, and it makes it just a whole lot easier than trying to do it all in one.
That's cool.
So, spheres, steady rest. So, the one that's probably the item that you can spend more time on is these elbow fixtures. And here's a Trent Bosch. You can see the price there, $375. And it's got the adapters, so you can put in some other sizes. I think this is a guy called Sinner. And you see, it's got the post that you have to mount to the lathe bed. There's a lot of parts and pieces there. Here's somebody else's. Here's another one. And, there's all kinds of names for them. Transformer. Now I put some prices on that sheet there. This one here just flipping amazes me. You've got 1, 2, 3 things you have to attach to your lathe bed. You've got a bearing up here that's on that rod so it glides back and forth. You've got something else up here to hold it so it's going, in and out of your project. And then it's got a laser on it. I think this thing's like $575. And it's no wonder, that's a ton of machining, And I don't think it's any more functional than anything else. This is one of the simple ones that I was actually thinking about trying to do this, but I'll explain why I didn't do this. But this is simple. It just goes in your quill. It's got a drop bar there so that you don't twist the apparatus from the quill. Start the whole thing whirly birding on you. This is mine set up. What I've been trying to do is figure out a way to use hardware store parts that you can just bolt together. So these are yokes and pieces here. And I might as well pass it around. And it's not all tightened up because you can tighten it up when it's done. But
Does it work?
it works, yeah. Yeah, and I've actually got another one that's made with 1/2-inch rod and stuff that I'm working on. Now, if you notice what's hanging onto the tool post there, that is a gate hanger that I cut the stud off of and then welded a little piece into. But I think there's got to be a gate part that might have a 1/2-inch stud on it, and if that's the case, you could put another collar on top of that. You wouldn't. This would be totally off the shelf. So that's my goal in terms of doing these things. This one here is interesting because look at this one up here. It's made out of wood, and he's got a couple metal parts there. And the reason I threw this up here, these little roller bearings and washers there are really just dumb simple, and they work really, really well. You just have to, size everything. It looks like he's got a T-nut down here. So I think he's way over-engineered there on his depth and his looks. But here's a real sophisticated one, 2x4s. So there's a lot of things that'll work. Here's another one that they're in action. This lower one here is called an elbow. It's another one that attaches to the quill. And then you get into some of these older ones, this Cobra and Cobra Junior. I mean, my ache and back, you got 1, 2, 3, 4 or 5 different points of rotation. When that's a ton of milling, machining, different sets of bearings, you name it. I mean, it's just, it just doesn't quit. Huh?
You made the call it?
Robust. They do it 2 sizes. Again, so here's this. Now, here's one of the ideas that I think is really worthwhile. This has a long handle that's either part of the tool or whatever. A lot of these, you see people just holding them right up next to the bowl, and it's a short piece. You don't have no control on it. You have no leverage on it. You need to come out with something like this that gives you control. So you've got your tool that's through your holder, then you've got a handle behind that. So you have leverage to work inside of your vessel. If you're standing up here like this, you know, working on it, and your mechanism's back here, you've got no control on that sucker.
That's why I've got this long handle thing to go with the Bosch hollow.
There you go.
It's a long handle, it works really well.
Yeah, so that exactly. So I didn't know you had the Bosch hollower. Yeah, so that's the idea that I think works. This is Vermic, which is a cousin of the Vicmark, and this is pretty simple. But again, you've got another part that you have to attach to the lathe, and that's another part that you have to buy. And here's a ring versus a rectangle like the Jameson.
I've got one of those circle ones if anybody wants to buy it.
Okay.
Works real well.
I don't know, never used it.
Well, just, there's not a new idea under the sun. The Jameson's at the top, and that's the one that I have that was in the picture with the lathe and everything. And I like it. It works really well, and you can hold it clear at the back, and you've got a lot of leverage on controlling the tip. And for the deep vessels, I don't think I would use the one I made or any one of them similar. But when you're doing little hollow forms, I think that is far more practical than trying to set up the Jameson. The Jameson, you can't really get into undercuts and stuff as easily as you can with one of the other ones. And let's see, this one down here, it's just another one. Again, something that's on the tool bed, something that's someplace else. Here's another photo of this from the side. I'm going to diverse here a little bit. This is a prosthetic tool that we've had for years, and we call it a router. And part of the reason that I like this thing is I can put all these tools that you can put on an angle grinder. I can put it on the end of the shaft here, and work down inside of a hollow, or do just like carving. And I can also put my buffing wheels on there. And there's a buffing wheel on there, so I can get inside or out. On the right-hand side, there is the dust chute. And so when that's all down like that, and that dust chute's open with a 4-inch to it, all that lint and crap that you're getting up in your face all the time is going down and away. This is the controller on it. It's a motor from MSC. We used to buy them for about $475. Now they're like $1,200 for the same thing. This is a scientific oven I had in the business years and years ago. I loaned it to a friend that loaned it to another friend, and I got it back about 7 or 8 months ago. So, and you can go from like 40, 50 degrees all the way up to 300 degrees. So when I did those pieces last month that I brought, this piece here, just set the oven at 70, 80 degrees, and pop it in and out of there when you're spraying it, and it's just real handy. And a lot of us have cold shops, so you can find one.
Is that electric?
Yeah, 110.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's just super simple. And then these are the 2 catalogs that I use. I use the McMaster car. If you find a yellow catalog like that at a garage sale, don't leave without it. It's about 4,000 pages.
That's a weight 20 pounds.
Oh, they do. Yeah, they're heavy. And I literally have flipped through that thing over the years at least twice. And I'm just curious, you know, so, you know, you flip through it and you think, where, you know, there's gotta be something, you know, that you were thinking about. And sure as heck, you know, it's in there. And so they're reasonably priced, I think. They ship like same day or the next day. You get it in like 2 days in California, or even overnight.
They're still alive and they don't hand out their catalog?
I don't think they do. I haven't asked because I've got a catalog. And then Granger, and then MSC and Granger, you know, merged. So there's a lot of stuff that you can get there, like these pieces of cold roll steel to make 3-point tools or whatever. You can buy all that stuff. You know, the steel that I made the scrapers out of. It comes out of the McMaster car catalog.
Arnie, is that MSC, is that the one that's up in, they have a store up in Reno?
Yeah, they also have a store right down along I-80 too.
Okay.
Yeah, and I don't know what they stock, you know, here, there, everywhere, but all the bearings, all these collars and stuff that I put this whole thing together with, all that came from the catalog. And, you know, I bought enough stuff now to probably build 4 systems because I don't know what I'm doing yet. And I still only have like $150 into all that stuff, but I could make 4 elbow setups right now with a little bit of welding.
Check out Zorro as well.
Zorro?
They're owned by Granger. A lot of the part numbers you can cross over,
Okay,
and you'll save a lot of money going to shopping from Zorro
good to
as
know.
opposed to Granger.
Okay,
I agree with that a lot, plus Zorro's $50 is free shipping. And go to Granger, look up the part number, and then put it in Zorro, because Zorro's search engine sucks.
Amen.
Yeah, but
Amen.
just look up Granger, it's
Yeah,
much better.
and
than
then take
put
the
it-
number and then put it in
yeah, for
Zorro.
those of you who might not have heard, look up the part number in Granger, then go to Zorro with that part number because they cross-reference, because Zorro's website is not as good. Did I get that right?
Yeah, MSC Direct was Enco.
Enco, you're right, yeah. So there's a lot of sources out there. With the hollowing systems, the Trent Bosch has its own built-in tool rest. This is a woodcut tool rest, and they got this saddle, and there's another saddle that fits the size of your tool. So you can lever against this, then you get a collar so that you're set at the right height. And this is like $59. So this is good for a lot of other things that you could use it for, where if you buy that as part of the Trent Bosch, well, you can't take it apart and use it separately. This is just handy if you're going to do anything inside of a bowl to make sure that you're not skating around. It just gives you a lot better tool control. So and the tool posts come. This is just screwed on, so the tool post, you give them your tool post size, and you get the bar with the correct tool post, and that makes it a simple thing. And I think we passed around these 3-point tools. Ed Larson is the one that had the idea about putting a nut on here for because when you go to sharpen this, you lay this on your table in front of your grinder, and sharpen there, skip one, go to the next one, skip one, go to the next one. You got your 3 points, and you always go back to the same spot. There's no question about whether you're off a little bit. That was one of the best ideas. And that's what's fun about these meetings.
So, a plug on your thing about globals, or where you get your
Carbides?
It seems like every company or every store has their own carbide cutter, and all the blade or all the inserts are a little bit different size. But that global supply, you can go in, you can specify what size you want.
Yeah.
So you have to measure out, but it's like they have such a wide variety, so it doesn't matter what tool you have, you can get an insert there that'll fit.
Yeah, when I called them about 6.5 years ago, so shortly after I started turning, I got a hold of one of the owners, and he says, "Oh yeah, we have Woodturners buying stuff here all the time." I said, "Well, I want this size," and he says, "Fine." And then when you look through their list, it gets laborious, but they've got about, like he says, about every size that you want. So.
I did talk to Jimmy Clues at Oregon, because I have his tools, and you cannot buy from another vendor the the cutter tools that he has because they're better to fit into his tool.
Bull.
That's challenge accepted. Challenge accepted, that's what he told me. And so then I went over and talked to Hunter,
Uh-huh,
who makes cutters,
right,
and he says, just buy mine. You can replace it with anything.
exactly.
Buy my tool.
Well, you know, so I did buy some from another outfit, and they were really nice, wide chips. I thought, boy, that's the real deal. They got a 2mm hole in the middle. Well, that's not going to hold much, you know, and I don't have a tool holder that's going to take a 2mm. So, you know, and it costs more to ship them back than what I paid for them. So it's like, I got some with a nice little 2mm hole in the middle in my trade. So, you know, and it's like doing this this thing. The only part that, right now that I have to make is the tool holder. It goes through here, and then you got to make some adaptation for your tool post. And it takes a little bit of welding, and actually I've bought collars, and I can weld a little tab on there and drill that and bolt right to it. But I'm really trying to figure out, like I say, give somebody a parts list, they can go to the hardware store and actually build one of these things just out of the hardware store. Or a part that somebody else is willing to sell that adapts to it. Because $300 or $400 for something that you can't spend $100 on, if you learn how to put it together. It just, and then, you know, if you save that kind of money, if you build all the stuff here, you just saved $1,000 or more. Don't worry about buying a cheap, you know, Chinese gouge. Buy a good V10 from Thompson, or you know, something from D-Way, or anybody else that makes a really good tool. You know, I mean, good tools. I think it was in Utah 2 years ago. The guy out of does platters. He's out of Colorado. He did a whole long study on tools. If you buy cheap tools and sharpen them, and then buy good tools and sharpen them, the cheap tools are going to wear out twice as fast. You're going to have to replace those tools, and you'll still have steel left on your good tools. So, you know, I mean, I've taken a couple, you know, half-inch or quarter-inch off some of my tools. So I don't know if I'm going to live long enough to wear them out, but you know, that's the way these guys think that make a living with their tool there. So,
Where did you get the yoke?
the yoke from MasterCard. And actually, the half-inch ones I bought over at Hills Flat and Colfax, they're way behind on their pricing. I got the half-inch ones for like, I think, $9. They haven't, you know, they've been there in trade so long they haven't changed their prices.
What's the name of that?
Hills Flat. This is called the yoke.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they don't have this part over there. So, and they have.
So Hills Flat, what kind of store?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm thinking everybody knows. That's like a general lumberyard hardware. There's one here in Grass Valley.
Yeah, it's just local, between Colfax and Grass Valley.
Yeah.
This is such a great club, I drive a long way to get here.
Well, I realized that after I was like going dumb here for a minute. So, and then, you know, anybody who has an idea, oh, I laid this out. Since I've done quite a bit of spindle work, what does that look like?
Cutting.
No, they're spindle cutters.
Yeah.
You want to make sure when you go to the tool swaps that you get a really long wrench, because when you're doing like little, you know, like furniture spindles, they'll have like little different nipples on the end that fit into the chair. So these have all been sharpened, and they make an excellent cutting tool for just knocking down your diameters. And so I've got a bunch of those. And the Auburn, now anybody that likes wood, and I was talking with these folks, the Auburn Guild meets the first Tuesday of every month. And it's anybody that likes woodworking, and it's a great group.
They're hilarious.
And we have a good time there. There's people that made a living at doing wood, but I was just telling them, there's a guy that built the violin, that the second person that passed it off as a Stradivarius. That's the kind of quality of woodworking and knowledge and depth that is in that club. Something else I was gonna say about it that has left me. But anyway, it's just fun to get together with a good group and share and push and shove and joke. Have a good time with all these things that we do. So thank you guys, and anybody that, you know, has a question, an idea, I'm not stuck on any of this. If there's a better way to do it, buy your inserts from Grizzly. Okay.
Yeah, that's a knockoff.